Welcome to TechTalk, a podcast dedicated to building community for technology managers in audiovisual and IT. My name is Steve Greenblatt. With us today, as always, is Mark Lavecchia. How you doing today, Mark?
Very well, good sir. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you.
Same.
We have a special guest today, as we did in our last episode, and this is a real-life technology manager. His name is Scott Tyner from Bates College. Hi, Scott. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to a good time here today.
Excellent. We hope to satisfy that. We had you on because we definitely want to share some of your experiences, and we know that we've crossed paths in different areas, including aviation and Infocom and so forth. We could start, if you could, just give us a little bit of your background, and then we're going to dive in to talk about a little bit about your experiences as a technology manager and what are the things that are valuable and how has the industry changed in terms of what technology managers do and where their place is, because from our experience and one of the reasons for establishing TechTalk is because we really see that the technology managers are becoming more of a prominent role within the AV industry. So I guess just give us a little bit of background and then we'll talk a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I've been in this particular, let's say, the AV industry now for about 12 years. My real background, my educational background is actually in education. I studied to be a social studies teacher. Then I went into IT for 4 or 5 years and ended up at Bates in the AV field for the past 12 years. You know, I've done various, as you mentioned, various podcasts. I do a little bit of writing. So I've been fairly active in the field through Technology Managers Council and other trade shows and talks and stuff like that.
Excellent. Great. So I didn't even realize some of your IT background, and that I guess will help lend itself to the conversation. That talking about councils and so forth, Mark and I had both been active in the Independent Programmers Council, which was established by Infocom, and what that did for us many years ago is it provided us with an identity and a home and a place that said this is a functioning group within the industry and they're legitimate. And the council was a great thing for us, and we felt that we did a lot of things, but over the years Infocom's focus has changed, and what we found is that unfortunately the path that Infocom wanted to take wasn't necessarily congruent with what we needed as a group, and we found ourselves a little bit lacking a purpose. And I'll let Mark expand a little bit, but we find that it's important for not only groups of like-minded people and similar people presence in the industry to be together, but also for that group to interact with other groups that have a similar capacity.
Well, and the cool thing about Infocom when we first were getting involved with the Independent Programmers Council is there were things that we needed to do right away, and we were provided the resources to get them done. We've got the IPC had some good feathers in their cap, not the least of which was the dashboard for controls, which pretty much set the standard within the industry of what to expect from a control system, which is the TV guide version of that, but it's still to this day you find it in consultant specs, bid specs, and so forth. You must adhere to these standards. Later on, one of the things that Steve and I were more directly involved in included the best businesses for independent control companies that says, look, just because you got a laptop and a cell phone and can write some code doesn't make you an independent control, an independent programming firm of any success. These are the things you need to do. You need to have, certificates of insurance liability, and you need to have your bases covered, basically, to show that you're an actual business, not some guy with a cell phone trying to make a couple of bucks. There's a home for them, but it wasn't. If you're competing with them, we needed to segregate them from the pack. And so we were able to do a number of things in that regard. And then, I don't know, one day we woke up and we were, put together with install group folks or something like that. And then the next thing they didn't have time for us on conference calls. And the next thing they didn't have time for us for meetings. And the next thing they'd get a little room at Infocom and put you in there with a bucket of water and a ladle and go, here, we'll see you guys in a good meeting. And chaos ensued. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. And so Steve says it nicely, and he says, well, Infocom found another direction that they were moving in, and I was like, this is a waste of my time. It doesn't. All we do is get together once a year. We'd all argue about what it is we were trying to accomplish. Then we'd elect a new chairman, and he'd come up with a whole new list of things that he wanted to accomplish. And we were peeing in the wind, so to speak. So as a result, we found that we created our own type of forum for us to, those of us that were interested, to get together and do things away from the Infocom thing. And he showed me your correspondence with him, and I got the sense that that's kind of what the tech managers were running into with Infocom. And I'd like you to elaborate. I don't have to, jump on them like I just did, but the forum should be there, and I think there's a need for a forum for guys like you and your brethren to gather. Yes.
Yes, and so I'm thinking, let's see, I could be a really bad guest and really test your abilities as hosts if I just said ditto.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right, well, thanks, everybody. We appreciate your time today. It's been a great podcast.
Don't worry, Mark's got plenty more where that came from. Just let him go.
But I'm not going to do that. So, it actually sounds a lot like the history of the Technology Managers Council. Interestingly enough, we started out with a really great purpose. Joe Shook is one of the founders of the Technology Managers Council. It used to be called the End Users Council. And the whole idea was exactly the same thing that you all had, which was to give us a presence in the industry and a presence in Infocom as an association. And we did that, and they did that very well. I think that the fact that there are podcasts like this with us on it, where there's technology managers on different committees right now for Infocom and the like, shows that we're a part of the industry. But just like you, over time, we really there was nothing for us to do. There was nothing for us to produce through Infocom, and so Infocom. Even to this day, we met, not that long ago, and Infocom is saying, we're happy to provide you a meeting space, we're happy to do these things for you, but we're not going to come up with projects for you to do, and if you all don't have a project to do, give that some thought. And I think that as a former chair of the council, and I think that if you talk to Greg Brown out at UCLA, who's the current chair, outgoing here in a month or so, they would tell you that there's what we're really looking for, what we really need, and what we really do is be a community, a place where you can meet other technology managers. One of the struggles that we always had, which is completely appropriate, is that we like to sit down and talk about products and what works and what doesn't work. Infocom, completely appropriately, really has to ask us not to do that as part of their forums, because they have to be independent of that. And so I think that what we found over time is that what we're really looking for is that community and is that sense of friendship. They did put on last year at Infocom. I was unable to attend, and it's been growing every year. I attended one a couple years ago, our first kind of technology manager social, where it was sponsored by a couple of vendors, and we just got together, had some beer, had some snacks, and got to meet each other. It was really great. So yeah, I take that kind of approach between the two of you, that I lay the blame of kind of the council struggling at really the technology managers for not really understanding what they need, except the community, and Infocom kind of just saying, like you said, we're kind of moving in some different directions here.
Now, in terms of the community, it's different makeup for people like Steve and myself, because we've got our own companies. Okay, so we share a lot of the business aspects of what we do on a regular basis, and I don't know that that's something that the technology managers deal with. I think you deal with budgets and schedules and products and designs, and whether you work with integrators or don't work with integrators, and how that all comes into your world. If there was a way for you to be able to communicate with each other on a regular basis, what do you think is one of the better ways? Do you think that, we've got these podcasts that we do, but do you think that message forums, where Crestron has message forums all over the place where people can share ideas and look for modules and stuff, do you think that type of an arena is something that the technology managers would dip into, posting blogs, things like that?
I do. I think I don't. I'm trying to think of how much I've heard from technology managers about different things we do. Certainly, some of the podcasts that I've done, I've got emails from various technology managers about saying, "Oh, liked what you said about this or that." So they do definitely look at those. There's a group on LinkedIn right now called the Crestron Owners Group that has a large number of technology managers on it who are constantly communicating. There's an email list that is well known in the community that people email out to. I think one of the things that technology managers or anybody in the kind of what we do, you may not be active for a month or so, and all of a sudden there's an issue that you need to deal with, and so suddenly it becomes very active. You can see a mail list with nothing on it for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you're getting 10 or 12 messages a day. So I think that mail lists are very important. I think the LinkedIn group works very well. I think podcasts on some kind of regular basis with interesting information, all of those things are very helpful to people. The other thing that we've done through the Crestron Owners Group is that we've got a few technology managers who do webcasts every now and again on certain products or topics that are of interest to them.
Do you find your hands, or you brought up something that was interesting to me, and sorry, Steve, but I think one of the things that you have to be careful of is product discussion, specific product discussions. Now, I've listened to some technology managers that are very opinionated about certain manufacturers or certain products or so forth. Do you feel like that's something where you need to have free reign without worrying about somebody slapping your hand saying, hey, don't talk about those guys that way because that's not going to be good for you?
So it's interesting. I work for a private institution, and so I certainly have different requirements than if I worked for a public institution and had to do some of the public bidding needs that they require. The other piece is certainly through Infocom, we heard that a lot, and I've done a few talks for Infocom as well, where they've really talked to you about, you can talk about products you use, but you have to be careful. The Infocom is not there to support one company over another, and I think that's fair. And so even on the Infocom mail lists, if somebody started kind of really promoting one product a lot or really kind of attacking one product, Infocom would kind of step in and say, this, you got to bring this someplace else. This isn't the place to do it. But at the same time, certainly on our Crestron Owners Group on LinkedIn, you will see attacks even on Crestron products that somebody's had a bad experience with. Yeah. So I do think that that's really important, because one of the things, and I'm sure you see it sometimes, is that I'll write a message and I'll say, this product is just such a piece of junk, I can't stand it, and somebody will write back and say, well, in the settings box, did you check off blah blah blah? And you're just like, oh no, and you find out that or you didn't upgrade the firmware or something, and so that it's not really a piece of junk. You just haven't done what you're supposed to do.
Well, and I've noticed, especially with Crestron, but with other manufacturers, is they monitor these things, and they do it not because they're looking for people to yell at, but this is where they find whether they can be better at something or not, or correct. Did you do your firmware and so forth? Because a lot of times you're going to pick up the phone at this point, if you think about it. You're going to pick up the phone and call an 800 number and sit on the line for 30 minutes while they track down an RMA and figure out what's going on with your product. Or can you go to your computer real quick and hit a couple of message boards and throw up some questions and say, I have this, does anybody run into it? And within 10 minutes, you've got people with real life experience coming back to you saying, yeah, this is what it does. Yeah, it does suck, or no, it doesn't suck this way. And that's the type of format that I know I've talked with Steve about, at least for Tech Talk, where we want you guys to be able to just have free reign. We don't want to bash people. That's a waste of time. We know that. But it leads me to wondering, what are the type of things you share with tech managers? I mean, if you think of, is it just product? Is it applications? Is it what are the things that you share with each other that you look to glean and learn from each other?
Truly everything. I mean, I can tell you, I mentioned Joe Shook earlier, is kind of one of the founding fathers of the technology managers. You had done a thing for a long time about budgeting and budget cycles, and it was something that I think probably every technology manager in the country has learned from Joe Shook about. how to do budgets and budget cycles and replacement cycles. I attended a webcast just a few months ago, maybe 2 months ago, from a technology manager, I think he's at Old Dominion, who did one on D-Tools, which was eye-opening for me. We loved it. I'd never even heard of D-Tools before, so there's software there. We definitely talk about product. Class capture has been a huge thing over the past few years, so there's all kinds of talk about different class capture products. There's programming. Sometimes you have programming questions. Sometimes we share designs. So it's truly just about everything that we talk about. But it's really, like you mentioned, Mark, it's really important to be able to just have that really open dialogue. And I will agree with you. I have noticed not just Crestron, but a few other manufacturers who kind of, you call them not stalkers, but people that they sit there and watch the conversation. And I've had them email me separately, not like, hey, how dare you say that, but hey, I noticed you said blah, blah, blah about our product. Hey, have you tried this or that? Or why don't you call so-and-so who's an expert in this? But I will also tell you, and I'm not going to name them, but I've had other manufacturers that I know from other people who have actually called them and kind of yelled at them, how dare you say that about our product, which is nowhere near as productive as the, let's help you, you've indicated a problem, let's help you with it.
Well, and I think it's got to be
mutual. Day and age, I was going to say, in this day and age with social media, what stops anybody from going out and spreading the word? So I can't believe that sensitivity is still an issue.
Well, I think that I'm not surprised to hear that, to be honest with you. I spent most of my career working for manufacturers in the AV business, and no matter what you see hanging over a booth at Infocom or whatever you see at their presentations, the competition has always been fierce. And they don't like you talking poorly about what they're doing. Crestron's always been, and I say that because I spent almost 10 years with them, I've been very good to reach out to people and say, look, we see you had a problem here. They would call me when I was their West Coast guy, and they'd say, hey, Scott, out here at Gates, he's got an issue. He's having a problem. Send a tech out there. Find out what's going on. We're reading his comments. Make this guy happy. Mm-hmm. Don't let him go. And then the trick at that point then is to have the Scott in this equation come back now to the community and go, hey, Crestron, they sent somebody out, they worked with me, I learned this, really just want to retract what I said before. That circle has to be completed, and so that type of thing I think needs to be held accountable within any community across the board. Because
typically people are reaching out because they want help, not necessarily to do the bashing, but to more express their frustration, but say, hey, I got this problem, I need it to be resolved. I hope that you guys can fix it for me. It's usually not to say that this is a terrible product and nobody should use it, unless everything they've been pushed to the limit. That's been my experience at least.
Absolutely, and for us, I would even say 9 times out of 10, rather than bashing, we're saying, I'm having this really weird problem. Am I alone out here? Is it really obvious that I'm doing something stupid, or has other people seen this exact same issue and maybe you've got an answer that I don't? I know that. There's people out there who have really great relationships with their Crestron rep or their Extron rep or their AMX rep, and they can call them if they see my email and say, hey, blah, 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 whereas I might not have a great relationship with a particular one of those. So it's exactly that. It's saying, who else has seen this? Or, am I really messing up, or is this something known, and is there a workaround?
Sure. So knowing that you have all of these different outlets, and it sounds like there are a few out there, is there a different use for different ones, and what are the strengths and weaknesses, and the idea? I mean, for us, we both I think agreed that Infocom has the name and the presence and the industry stature, but with when you're talking about having different outlets, do you go to one for a different purpose than others, or is it maybe one only has certain type of vehicle to communicate that others don't, or how does that work?
I'm trying to think. I think that I talked about our LinkedIn group before. We'll go to our LinkedIn group when we have a particular question about a Crestron item. There's a mail list that a lot of us have used for years called AV1. that we'll go to for more general issues. I know that CCUMC, which is a media consortium group, has a mail list, and we'll go out, and people go out to them for more general questions. I don't think that we divide it. The only one I can really think of is that LinkedIn group, which is very specific towards a certain topic.
Sure, that would make sense. And as far as education, one of the initiatives that we're looking at with TechTalk, and we see as being a big value for everybody, is getting unfiltered education. I think the manufacturers are very open to educating you on their products, and I'm sure that they use an application or a general portion of the industry or general idea to be able to open that door and then say, well, our product fills this need. Do you guys have a resource for education typically? Is that something where you see a void?
So one of the things that I see a lot with education is a lot of the I can think of Crestron, Extron, Audia, Biamp. They all allow us to go to free training and do free training with them. And it's great. We've got staff that are DMC certified. We've got one going out to Audia later this year to get certified. And it's all aimed specifically at the product that they're selling, which is fully appropriate, right? They're paying for us to go out there and get training. It should be on that. One of the things that I found, and I don't know if this is particular for tech managers or not, though, is that they love to learn. They're really interested in learning from other technology managers. And so I mentioned this webinar that Dwayne Smith did for D-Tools. So they have Old Dominion has a, I'm not sure if it's WebEx or what they use to do it, but they've got their own system. So they used that, and Dwayne, a technology manager, gave the webinar. He completely did the webinar and showed how he uses D-Tools. Now there was a D-Tools rep on the call, and when there was a question that Dwayne didn't know, the D-Tools rep answered it. But it was technology managers learning from each other, and it was really, and I really think that that's how we do it the most, and that kind of thing.
Now, one question I have for you to follow up on that is the means in which you look for this. It's easy, I've grown up in sales, so it's always the first thing I say, oh, you're busy, and you don't have time to sit and watch videos all day. You've got a lot of things going on. I know for a fact that Steve runs every morning, and when he runs, he throws on his headset and he's listening to podcasts that are relevant to his business and stuff. Is there a means to get that you look for that data to fill, to make sure that it's not taking away from your duties on a regular basis? Where do you turn? When you're running in the morning, do you you're on the train watching stuff? Where do you like to get your information from?
Yeah. Well, I can guarantee you, Mark, that if we were talking in person, you would realize that I don't run every morning. And I live in rural Maine, so the train doesn't quite come out here. But I get your question just the same. It's interesting. We were talking before we came on air that one of the things I've started doing is I'm getting a master's degree right now, and I need to drive an hour to New Hampshire to get it. And so that's one of the things I've started doing is putting podcasts on my iPod and listening to them as I drive down to New Hampshire. The other thing I'll do is if they're not overwhelming, I'm a person, I think a lot of technology managers are, who believe that being educated is a critical role in my job, and knowing what's next is a critical role. So one of the things I typically do is I will grab lunch at the cafeteria, and once or twice a week bring it back to my office, and if there's a webinar going on that I'm interested in, I'll sit there and eat my lunch and watch it, or I'll read some articles during my lunchtime and do it. So I typically do that kind of stuff during a lunchtime when I'm at work. If there's something that's really interesting, I'll get my whole group together, and we'll sit in a conference room and watch it. Whether we do that during lunch or some other time, it depends on when the webinar is happening.
Oh, that's interesting, because one of the things we talk about amongst Steve and myself is we want to keep it in bite-sized pieces. You don't have a lot of time, but at the same time we want to make the most of the time that you have. So maybe sometimes we have to break it into 1, 2, 3 pieces. One of our last podcasts, what we did was we brought in an integrator that I work with out here in California that works with technology managers, and what are the things that he has learned in working with them so that other integrators can make it easier. I don't know if working with integrators is something that you yourself deal, or you do most of your stuff directly. But now that next step for that conversation, so we took 30 minutes and talked about that. Our next step is to grab one of the technology managers that he works with and say, look, when I work with an integrator, these are the things that I expect from them, and this is the way that I want the relationship to work.
Right. I think bite-sized pieces is really critical, and I think that I've mentioned a couple times this webinar that we did. I don't know how many people were on it. Maybe 30 or 40, and that might not sound like a huge amount. But if you did it the week after, there might be 30 or 40 different people. It's all about schedule and how it fits in. I don't know how many people have watched the recording of it. The nice thing about the webinar is you could ask a question if you had one, but it was also recording. You could watch it later. And so I think that to that degree, Mark, for me, one of the things that would be really kind of helpful is a consistent output of products, so that we know that every other week on Wednesday there's a webinar, or every other week on Wednesday there's a podcast that comes out. So we can kind of schedule that into our schedule, that on the odd Wednesdays of a month is when I sit down with my lunch and do this.
That's great. That's great. That's great.
Point.
Yeah, that's it. That absolutely is. The other thing that was just crossing my mind was something you mentioned earlier. One of the topics that comes up, and I hear it a lot come up from technology managers here on the West Coast, is just the topic of capture. Capturing data, being able to bring it in. And it's not just universities. We do it at medical facilities that are training, soon to be doctors, nurses, and so forth. Put them into rooms, capture the data, stream the data, pass it around, and it's kind of an interesting situation for you, because what we're trying to do is talk to you so that we can develop content and get it to you, while you're working with the university to help the professors create content that they can distribute out to others. And so you've really got a frontline sense for what they need, because you're pretty much trying to fill that for yourself as well, no?
Absolutely. I got to tell you a quick little story that relates to that. So again, I have just started a master's degree program, and one of the things I got to start this program was a Surface tablet. And I love the thing because I'm using it in a way that I would never use in my daily job. I'm using it as a student, and I think it's the most amazing thing in the world. Also, I'm using Blackboard as a student. I'm using email as a student. I'm using Box as a student. And so it's a completely different perspective than what I would do as a technology manager in my regular job. So yeah, it's really an interesting way to kind of say, I'm watching these podcasts and I'm watching this pre-recorded content again as a student technology manager, as opposed to the technology managers helping other people create them. So I do think you learn from doing that in ways that aren't even kind of intended in what the subject might have been.
Sure. I mean, I say all the time it would be great to use the systems that we program, and I mean that's really how you're going to get some perspective, and putting yourself in other people's shoes is certainly has a lot of value.
Yes.
Yeah. We're always joking about the plumber that always has a leak in his house, And if somebody comes into my house and turn on the TV and they're like, "This is it? This is your remote? This is what you've got?" And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you that I had something more advanced and really sexy, but it doesn't work. I know your house is fully automated, though. But I think that, yeah, of course. But I think I think once you've got the Giants playing, then you lose all thoughts of technology anyway. So
yeah, we don't want to talk about that.
I know we don't want to talk about the Giants. But
it's been very depressing sports season here in the New York, New Jersey area.
Yeah, well, it's good in Buffalo when you've only got 7 wins and everybody's excited about it, So don't cry for me, Argentina.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to talk football. I mean, from New England. I mean, if that's what you guys want to do.
Yeah, you and Mark could talk, because that'd be an interesting conversation. He's a Bills fan.
Just waiting for your quarterback to retire. That's all.
A couple of little things I wanted to just touch on. One is the Infocom is doing the connections idea, where they're putting together trade shows that are more targeted. Is that a big value to technology managers? Unfortunately, they're only locating them, it seems, in prominent areas. They tried to have one in Philadelphia, which had to get canceled. They're having one in San Jose, and they're going to come back to New York, I think, next November. They just announced that. Do you see that being a big value, or is that just going to really tackle the densely populated areas, and isn't going to have much value to the others in the community?
I think I struggle with that a little bit, and I can tell you that I've been part of a couple of Infocom events. I did one in Tampa with them, and I did one in Boston just last spring with them. And they were calling it at the time, I think, Infocom on Campus. Honestly, when I got our outline here for today, it's the first time I'd heard of Infocom Connections. So I don't know anything about that. But I think you point out, it's a good point, right? Which is, we did the one in Boston, for example, and so anybody within, let's say, 150 miles of Boston might attend that. I think it had 50 to 60 people show up. They didn't record it, and they didn't live stream it. So those two things I thought kind of weakened the possible attendance or what people could get out of it. Certainly you're not going to fly somewhere for a 6-hour day with an hour and a half lunch in between. That's just not going to happen. So you are very limited to the amount of people that could go there. I think that Infocom would be, and they struggle, right, because you have to pay to go to some of these, and it depends whether you're a member or not a member, how much you pay. So they struggle with streaming them for free if you're going to pay to go. It's kind of like a regional blackout or something, right? Speaking of sports. I think it's valuable, and I think that that's one of the things that Infocom can do, because if they put it on and only 50 people show up or 40 people show up, they've kind of got some money behind them that they get some sponsors, and they can float that, where other people may not be able to. So I don't want to say it's useless and Infocom shouldn't do it, because I think that it's useful, and I enjoyed going to Boston. But it's certainly not going to hit the highest number of technology managers possible. Sure.
So it's all, and I hate to make light of it this way, but it's kind of it's going to hit the highlights, but it isn't going to really be something that's enough to be of value to everybody. They're going to hit the highly populated areas, it sounds like. And
right, exactly. And honestly, I mean, I'm not that far from New York, but I'm not going to make it to the one in New York. I'm not going to go to New York for a 6-hour event.
Sure.
It takes me 6 hours to get there.
Yeah. I mean, PR-wise, it's certainly a good thing, and I agree with you. I think the concept is good. But to your point, how do you take that, and how is there any way that you can reach out to the people that are sitting in their office and still give them the benefit?
Right, and I think that they did do one. They were doing one a couple years ago that they were streaming, and I do know that I watched a couple of those, and they were interesting. So that's something that anybody might want to consider is if they're going to do something like that, to stream it, and even if they somehow charge or whatever, it gets a little bit more of an audience. I don't think that technology managers are afraid to pay a reasonable price for something like that.
Sure.
So.
What do you think the frequency is of going to the big trade show? Because I know last year, and I don't know if it was a down year, but many of the technology managers that we reached out to, because we put together an event in Las Vegas where we had dinner and a presentation, and I would say the majority of the people that we contacted said, hey, we'd love to join, but we're just not going to the show.
I'm not 100% sure either. A lot of the technology managers I know go to the show every year. Me in particular, I I haven't been to the show in a couple of years, and the reason for that is that I felt that it was more important over the past few years to send the people that work for me because they were going to get the experience of the show, and they were getting certification. And so we weren't going to send 3 or 4 people there. So I took 2 people. I sent them. They got certification. They got training, and they got to walk the show floor. I think that one of the things we do, to answer Mark's question of a while ago, is we do a lot of our own installs and programming and design, but we work very closely with a consultant and an integrator about product. And so I will call them and ask them what product. You can hear my dogs here kind of having a meltdown here in the background. I apologize for that.
That's no problem.
So it's recorded, live and not redone. Anyway, so we will call them and I'll say, hey Dave, tell me about streaming products that you may have or different projectors. Tell me about some projectors with HD base T. So I don't know that for technology managers being on the show floor is enormously helpful. I've personally never found it really, really helpful to be on the show floor. Very helpful for all the training and education that goes on at Infocom, but the show floor itself is a tough sell for me to get out on, to be honest.
Well, and this goes back to something we've talked about previously, Steve, which is that if you at your university need to learn, know, or get some information about a specific product, they'll come to you. Somebody will come to you. Somebody will get you the information you need. All the years I worked at a manufacturer in sales, right after the trade show, the very first thing I had to do was put together my itinerary for visiting everybody to bring them the product that they just saw at Infocom. And after a while, I started thinking to myself, if we're going to give them in-depth one-on-one training and information on this equipment, what's the sense of going to the trade show floor if we're going to be out there anyway? What we found was that folks like yourself would come because this gave them an opportunity to either A, talk about a application and how the manufacturer could see they get the engineers there to talk to you about how they would see the implementation of that hardware into your particular app is one thing, or maybe you've had some grievances and say, look, not for nothing, but I've been having difficulty with you lately. And I want you to tell me what you're doing here to make this better. Are you growing too fast? Is your quality control for the product going out the door? What is going on? Because I like your stuff and I need to get it. And that one-on-one, face-to-face with right up to the president of the company is of great value if that's a need. But if you're going to send people on a trip and they're going to come back with nothing but some information, a baggie, with some tchotchke items in it, and a ribbon draped necklace that shows all the councils and meetings they went to, you can do that in your office. You've got better resources, your time, your money, and your energy. Come back with certification, come back with training, come back with knowledge, something we can apply. Now the value is there.
Right, exactly. And I've always said, we could send our guys to Virginia to get their Infocom CTS certification and pay as much as we'd send them to Infocom and get it, and then at least they get the experience of the show floor. But the other thing, Mark, is I'm from Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. We have 1,700 students, maybe 60 classrooms. Other than George Feldstein, I'm not going to talk to a president of any company out at Infocom. They're not going to talk to me. And I say George just because he would. I mean, he would talk to anybody. Right. Right. But the other ones, and rightfully so. I mean, they're not going to spend their time with a guy who spends $2,000 a year on their equipment. So we don't even get that personal connection. I do know one tech manager from out in California actually, who when he goes to the show floor, he jokes that he doesn't visit any booths that are bigger than 10 by 10, because those are the guys that will talk to him, and those are the guys that are these little crazy products that you didn't even know existed. That's interesting.
Wow. Huh. That's great. I mean, I would concur. I mean, for me and I think Mark as well, the value of the trade show isn't necessarily seeing the booths, but more so seeing the people. And I think that's I guess another good sign of why community is important.
Yeah, that's why we used to refer to Infocom as the prom. It's a lot like the prom. You didn't want to spend the money, you didn't want to go through all the hassles, but if you didn't show up, everybody go, "Where's Scott? What's wrong with Scott? What's going on?"
Yes. No, it's true, right? Because I do. When these past few years, when I've gone to I haven't gone to Infocom, it's kind of been like, oh, what's wrong? Sometimes it's kind of like, did you get fired? Is that the problem?
Right.
No, I've got other priorities right now.
See you updating your LinkedIn profile. What don't we know about you? Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Scott, and your insight. And I think that this has been great. And I took a lot of notes, and I think that we reaffirmed a lot of the thoughts that we had, and got a lot of great feedback. We hope to get to see you more and include you in some of the things that we're doing. And I think that for us, we're looking for people like you to help steer this community. So I appreciate you being on with us. And if you had any parting words or information on how people can reach out to you, you could share that. That would be great.
Well, I actually want to thank you for doing this with the community, because as I have mentioned to you, as we talked about setting up this podcast, I think there's a big need right now for a place, a home for technology managers to go to talk, to do webinars, and right now we're kind of stitching various things together, but there isn't that one home. And if TechTalk can become that, it'd be really fantastic, and it'd be something that I think was of great use to all technology managers. So no, my tagline for Twitter is down there on the bottom. I love tweeting out various things, so go ahead and contact me that way if you're interested or have questions.
Great, thanks so much, and we'll put this on audio too. So I'll say it's at Stiner, Stiner. Mark. We had another great show, and can you let everybody know how to reach you, and any conclusions and takeaways that you had?
Well, I first of all, I really appreciate you taking the time, because it really provides validation for what we're trying to do. It makes us wake up and go, hey, you know what? There really is a need here. I particularly, Steve, liked his comment, making sure that there's consistency in terms of when things are released, so people know it on a scheduled basis when they can see things. Keep it short and brief is what we always try to do. You're much better than that than I'll ever be. But and
sometimes too brief.
Yeah, no, I was like, hello, but Scott, I really appreciate it. I'm available. My bmasoftwaresolutions.com and at Mark Lavecchia with I'm 54 now followers, Steve. It's insane.
Really?
Yeah, 54.
Wow.
Wait, 53. Never mind. Sorry.
I was gonna say, wow, I don't usually do webcasts with people that I can beat, so I think I've got more than that. So that makes me feel good.
Yeah, no.
And Mark's been growing exponentially since June.
Yeah, well, and I think probably 20% of them are women trying to get me to sign up for some type of web content that would get me in trouble. So I just kind of. But I got 54, and I'm pretty happy about it. But again, thanks, Scott. We really greatly appreciate your taking the time with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So a few parting words from me. I also feel like the idea of having consistent content, focusing on learning is important, and also trying to have technology managers learn from other technology managers. I think that was probably the number one takeaway that I had. I just wanted to wrap up by sharing some great news. So TechTalk has been a long time in the making, and this week we are putting out our official website, and tomorrow is the big announcement. It's out there at techtalkav.com, and you can preview it today. We have blogs on there. We posted these podcasts. We're going to be putting our podcasts on iTunes soon. This is our fourth one, and we also have a private LinkedIn group, which will hopefully help to bring people together for some discussions, and we want to get the conversation going, and we hope to be able to bring some education to this community, and as well as help them take their voice and put it out to the industry. So long for now. My name is Steve Greenblatt. You can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on Twitter and LinkedIn and so forth, and my company is Control Concepts at controlconcepts.net. So I look forward to talking to everybody soon. Take care.